So thanks again, Eric, for letting us invade your house.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the biggest surprises for me when I met you is that being a fan of yours for many years, I built into my head this idea of a portly gentleman up in Dudley in the Midlands, possibly in a lot of tweed, creating this spectacular, beautiful music. So it was a huge surprise when I actually met you, and you're from America, actually from Nevada. Yeah. And for me, it's a bit of a cognitive dissonance of the style of choral work that you create and coming from Nevada. How did that happen?
Yeah, it was really by accident. So I grew up in a very small town in northern Nevada. At the time, I think population 9,000. And I played music by ear. I had a decent ear, and we had a piano in the house. So I didn't read music at all, and I played pop songs and made up my own little songs. But it wasn't until I was 14 years old that I discovered electronic music. I was into computers at the time. I was programming on a Commodore 64, and I discovered Jean-Michel Jarre and Tangerine Dream and Kraftwerk, and that led me to Depeche Mode, and then I just wanted to be in Depeche Mode. And so I spent my entire high school career writing pop songs, electronica pop songs in my bedroom. And then at the age of 18, I went to university in Las Vegas, the biggest state school in Nevada, and I joined the choir on a whim, and it absolutely changed my life. It was, it was as if my entire life I had been called one thing. You know, it was like hearing my real name for the first time, you know? Not Eric, but oh, that's the sound that's been in my heart my whole life. It was a singular experience, totally transformative.
And so, can you remember that moment? Was it the action of singing, forming the harmonies, or was it the music itself?
This will sound like the most Californian thing you've ever heard, but bear with me. So I remember it was the first piece that I sang with a group of people was, we started rehearsing the Requiem by Mozart. And so until that moment, I didn't even know this was possible. Not just people coming together and singing like that and sounding like that, but counterpoint. I didn't really, and there's no better way to experience counterpoint than actually be in the middle of it in 3 dimensions. So to hear these voices around me and moving with this complexity that I couldn't have imagined, I think just on a musical level, I was stunned. I felt it in my body. I felt changed physically. But looking back on it, here's the Californian part. I really believe that it's because for the first time in my life, I felt part of something larger than myself. I grew up without religion, not as an atheist, but just not really exposed to religion. And something about being a single voice in a sea of other voices, and all of these people focused to do one thing, to come together in that room and breathe together and make something beautiful. I realized then that's my vocation. I have to spend a lifetime doing this.
I guess that is what's specifically fascinating about choral work, is it's many different souls coming together to create a single organism almost.
Yeah, that's it. And unlike most other kinds of music, it can be cross-generational. So you can have teenagers or even younger kids singing with people who are 60, 70, 80 years old. So there's this community feel to it that's really unlike any other music making.
So how did you transition from being a choral singer or a contributor to a choir to being a choral composer?
So in the 3rd year of my 7-year undergraduate degree, I decided that I was going to write a piece of music for this conductor, this man named David Weiler, who had changed my life. He had changed my life twice because not only did he get me into the choir and I fell completely in love with it, but he got me on the road to conducting. My first conducting experiences with David, and he let me try it out. And so he had this tradition that every year at the end of the semester, the choir would sing a different setting of the English poem, Go Lovely Rose. At the time, there were maybe 6 musical settings of this. And he had got this tradition from his high school director. So since he was young, he had been doing this at the end of every year. And I thought, I'll write him his own setting of this his own musical setting, and give it to him as a gift, this humble gift, student to mentor. And so I took my best shot. By then I could sort of read music. I was 21, and I wrote it out as best I could. I had somebody help me with some of the harmonic spellings, and then we sang through it in choir, gave it to him. And it was amazing because I heard for the first time me outside of me in the hearts and souls and breaths of other people. And that was a transformative experience. And then I have no idea why he decided to do this, but our choir was selected to sing at a big choral conference at the end of the year, and he programmed that piece. And so as I was coming off as a singer, coming off the stage, this woman rushed up to me and said, "Is that piece published?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Would you like it to be?" I said, "Yeah." And so suddenly I was a choir composer.
And I think it's really important for people who maybe don't consider themselves to be on the correct road to become a composer, a choral composer. You know, myself, I didn't go to music college, and the thing that basically suggested in my own head that I wasn't therefore going to become a composer was that preconceived idea that you needed to go that traditional route. So it's...
Yeah, absolutely. I see this now more and more and more. I'd say more composers than not come from a very non-traditional background. And I think, after really looking at it, there's a strength to it. There's a real strength to being unburdened by the knowledge of what came before, especially in the classical composition tradition. God, you know, you've got Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Prokofiev, Debussy, you know, these giants, absolute giants, and it's incredibly intimidating. And there's a sense that here's the line, the lineage, and here's a way to write. And I think when you come to it late or naively, like I did, you see it in a different way, and you take the parts you like and you sort of ignore the parts you don't like. It also takes a lifetime of study and learning to really understand what they were doing. But then I think you start creating music that maybe is a little different and special because you don't really know what you're doing. You know, you stumble around and make all these beautiful mistakes. I know now in my life I can only look back and say, wow, the time when I didn't know what I was doing, there were some raw ideas there. Maybe they weren't polished, but they were interesting.
I'm talking about what's gone before. Whilst you very much write in your own style, there is a very distinctive aesthetic. And would it be fair to say that aesthetic is of a British tradition?
Huh. Yes, although I didn't realize it when when the aesthetic began. Yeah, there's no question. I would say that, well, it's funny, when I think of my aesthetic, there's a lot of dimensions. So, you know, I've written a piece called Godzilla Eats Las Vegas, right? Which isn't necessarily the British tradition, right? Another piece called Equus, which is, you know, vibrant and flashy and super rhythmic and minimalist in a way. So when I think of my aesthetic, I think it's maybe broader, but I imagine what we're talking about is this kind of thing that I guess I'm best known for. And that thing comes from, even more than a harmonic language from say Britain and Europe, it comes from the atmosphere, the cathedral atmosphere. I'm not a religious person, so it's not that it's, for me, a religious experience, but those buildings they were built for singing, right? They understood reverberation and stone and glass, and they were designed for the music to lift into the heavens. And that's the aesthetic for me, are these contemplative human moments that are made larger than life.
So something I find fascinating about something I hear you've investigated a lot is the idea of these close harmonies and their relationship to vibrato. Could you talk us through that?
The close harmonies and vibrato, for me, it became very clear early on that in order to get those close harmonies to work, right, 2 or 3 notes or a cluster of notes together, you couldn't sing them with vibrato. Because once the vibrato is in there, you lose the coherence of the chord itself. It's hard to understand harmonically what's happening. And for me, it's essential that those harmonies are understood, because the right combination of notes in the right cluster, I feel, contains just so much emotional information, really subtle and nuanced emotional information. So it's not just ooh, that's spooky, or ooh, that's sad, or ooh, that's beautiful. That it can sound like the fleeting moments of love. You feel this in your body, or love with melancholy, or you can paint emotionally with those clusters. And the only way to make that happen in those close harmonies is with straight tone singing. It's not that I'm not a fan of big romantic singing. In fact, I love it when the application is right, but for those close harmonies, nothing beats straight tone.
And so your journey began in Nevada. We're here today in California. At what point did you come across the mountains? Are there mountains?
Into California.
Yeah.
Maybe. So California, even as a child, always held this kind of mythical place in my heart. We'd come to Disneyland once every couple of years, and I just remember driving through California. It's always green. It's especially here in Southern California, it's always beautiful. The beaches are exquisite. And so I finished my bachelor's degree in Las Vegas, and then I spent 2 years in New York. I did my master's degree at the Juilliard School. And then I decided I wanted to score films. This is what I wanted to do, was write music for movies. So I moved out to Los Angeles to make my way. And I tried, I suppose, for a couple of years, but it just never really happened. And all the while, I was writing more and more classical music and more music for choirs. And I guess my career path just took me that way. And so I ended up living in Los Angeles for 15 years, writing music for choirs. And then I moved to London for 5 years. That's where I formed my choir. And then I just moved back to Los Angeles 3 years ago, I suppose. And I suppose the reason I'm here now is because there's something special about the West Coast, about California. Anything is possible. You feel it in the DNA of the people, of the place. I think it's not a coincidence that Hollywood is here, that the entire tech industry was born on the West Coast, that there's a sense of optimism and naivete and possibility that I think doesn't really exist anywhere else in the world. And I'm drawn like moth to flame.
And going back to London, you have created this amazing, or curated rather, this amazing group of singers. Do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, so I love these people. It's been year after year. The way it really started is I would go to a Tallis Scholars concert or a Tenebrae concert, some of the world's best choirs, and then I would just cherry pick singers. I'd say, wow, I'd really love to hear him sing, and let's bring her in. And so just sort of my favorite singers from around London. And slowly over time built this group of people that is, they're extraordinary musicians. Every time I stand in front of them conducting, I'm just humbled by the level of musicianship and the intellect, the musical intellect. And they're lovely people.
Yeah.
I just like being with them.
Oh, absolutely. And when you write now, do you have these particular singers in mind?
Yes, not only the singers themselves, but their faces. I can see as I'm writing now, I'm working on a piece right now, and as I write a soprano line, I can see all 5 of them right there smiling back at me. I know this solo, oh, this is perfect, she'll sound terrific. You know, like, even if they're not the ones who eventually sing it, that's the sound I have in my mind now are these people.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned before that you'd created a lot of electronic music using the Commodore 64. I presume then you write using computers and samples and that kind of stuff?
I don't, believe it or not. So I've gone decidedly low tech over the years. Yeah, and I was a real nerd in the, so this was the late 80s. And, you know, I had my EMU drumulator and I had my Juno 106, and I was sequencing it on an ESQ1, and also with the Commodore and the first Macs. I had a Mac SE30, 40 meg hard drive. And yeah, so I was a real tech nerd. And then as I began to write acoustic classical music, I got further and further away from that, and now I write only pencil and paper, and at a piano, or here in my little studio at a piano samples. But most of the time I try to even get away from the keyboard and just write in my head and then go back and check and see, okay, does that sound the way I imagine it would? Yeah, so super low tech now.
Why is that? Why have you made that?
So I found that maybe it's because I'm self-taught as a keyboard player, but then my hands just seem to go, say I'm writing A flat major. My hands are gonna do things in A flat major every time. There's just a way that they move. They just, they go, and so I found that I was kind of handcuffing myself with each new piece I would write. I'm there, and then it almost becomes muscle memory, and I had to fight against it. And then the other thing I found is that I wasn't really writing for strings. I was writing for the keyboard. I wasn't really writing for voices. I was writing, and so even no matter how big your hands are, if you're you can't really get these, a big wide spread, and so you end up writing here. It sounds nice on the piano. I found that when I went away from the keyboard and wrote to paper the individual lines and tried to write ergonomically for the actual instruments, that the compositions were just better.
So what is your process now when planning a new choral work?
So, well, this holds true for any kind of work, for choral work, orchestral work. For me, everything is about the structure and the deep, deep, deep structure. So even if harmonically it's very, very simple, to me, the structure is everything. So what I'll do is I'll start with something like this. So here, this is a movement from a larger piece that I'm writing right now called The Sacred Veil. And not to go too much into detail, but the poetry is being written by my best friend, Charles Anthony Silvestri, written a bunch of pieces together. He's written the poetry for Luke Sarumque and Sleep and Leonardo Dreams of a Sublime Machine. And this piece is about his wife who passed away from cancer 12 years ago. He's finally writing about this. And so this movement is called I'm Afraid. And it's a single line of text that he remembers that they were sitting there. The doctor came in and said the words you never want to hear. I'm afraid we found something. And so the entire text is, I'm afraid we found something. And then the medical description of what it is, which the way he describes it, and which I can only imagine when you're first hearing this upon diagnosis of cancer, must just sound like Latin. It's coming, I mean, frankly, half of it is Latin or Greek, it's medical speak, but it's just, it's a storm of incomprehensible terms, right? But it's happening to you. It's your mortality that this is being spoken about. So, trying to find a structure for all of this, what I do is I start and I draw these pictures. And in this case, this is relatively linear. Sometimes I'll start at the side of a page and draw what I call the emotional architecture. What is the emotional journey that I want the audience to feel? And almost always this will be before I write a note of music. So here I wrote in the intro, I just got kind of a rhythmic motive. And the rhythmic motive is this kind of idea. I'm not even sure what I'll do with it yet, but that makes you feel that what must be that nervous energy of that moment, and that never-ending clock that's starting. And then once I know that's a building block, then I can echo it. It's gonna be here. I know it needs to come back here. We'll develop it in here. We'll finalize it here. So before I write a note of music, that's gonna be the plan. Then the second theme, or the idea musically and emotionally that will complement it, is introduced here, and then is echoed here, and is echoed here. So there's this deep structure. And then I like to play number games endlessly with these things. And so for this entire piece, the number is 3. The idea being that everything that's repeated is repeated 3 times to give it a sense of inevitability, right? There's a pattern. The first time something is repeated, it's new. Second time, the mind detects a pattern. And the third time, oh, this is cyclical. We're in this. So everything is about 3. So then I start to break it down. Can this be 3 portions long before this first block? Then these 3, then these 3. And so endlessly building this skeleton for the thing. And then I start to write the notes. I start to write the music so that it's got, it's connected to the depth of architecture. They're not just notes.
It's absolutely fascinating. And this architectural plan, where does this sit in your head for a while? Is it at the gym, in the shower?
Yeah.
Where does it's just,
yeah,
you live with it?
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm laughing hearing myself talk about it, it sounds like I've got it all worked out. It's a disaster while it's happening. So what it feels like is it's an emotional storm, and I know there's a thing that I want to make, and maybe it could be that, and I don't, and I feel an ache in my throat, and it can go for days, it can go for weeks at a time. I just can't solve it. What? Maybe it, and then maybe one day I'm laying in bed, and then, oh, of course. Of course, and the solution is always way simpler than I had imagined, right? But somehow it just takes that moment. I wish I could bottle whatever it takes to make that moment happen, that thing, but it's almost always simple.
This I find absolutely fascinating, Eric. I think something that I've always felt as someone who writes applied music, so to a picture or to a game, something like that, is it provides me with a framework. Because in this kind of land of infinite choice, without some form of framework, you really are kind of out to sea, and it becomes incredibly daunting. I don't know if this is something that you feel you can be therefore feel more creative within some form of architectural structure.
Absolutely. Oh, so you articulated it beautifully. I think oftentimes when I've talked to film or television composers, they feel handcuffed by, it's got to start now and it's got to end now, right? And it's 1 minute and 42 seconds, period. That's what it is, right? And you got to hit this beat and you got to hit this beat. So there's this feeling of being handcuffed. Being where I am, where I'm out to sea, and there's no structure whatsoever, it's impossible to write like that. Right? You just pieces wander and don't mean anything. And so for centuries, classical composers have actually taken structure. It started with dance structures, right? Bach, all those pieces that he wrote, those are dance structures. And then finally we get to the classic sonata form, A, B, A. That's not just because it was popular at the time, it's because it gave composers a very specific structure to work in. Once that structure is in place, then I find the beauty of composition is in the adaptation of the structure, right? So you put yourself in the tightest possible box and then try to figure a way out. That's where the interesting ideas happen, is in that evolution, right? Is adapting to your handcuffs in a way. So yeah, I think I've learned finally that I have to build myself, frankly, I have to build myself a little film score.
It's interesting that you mention a comparison between the world of media composition and free composition, if you will. Now, something that us media composers have is the kind of the deadline. It's finished, it's locked, it's in the cinemas, it's on iTunes, it's finished. The space that you're working with, in many respects, is more ephemeral. Is there a temptation to tinker after you've finished pieces?
Yeah, endlessly, and it's terrible. I also envy media composers for the deadline, and I also learned to hack myself early on with this. So what I'll do is I'll set up a piece and make sure we know that May 19th, 2020, this piece will be premiered. Because if it weren't for the fact that they were selling tickets and my name is on there, and I'd never finish. I'd still be working on my first piece. It's never going to be right. I'll procrastinate every day because tomorrow I'll be a better composer. Tomorrow I'll have a better idea. I remember Hans Zimmer said to me once, he said, why go with your fifth bad idea when you can go with your first bad idea? I always love that. And I think the idea is, like, I know myself, I would write with as much time as I have. If they give me a week, then it'll take me a week to finish it. If they give me 2 years, it's going to take me 2 years to finish it. And so that deadline is actually incredibly helpful, because with composing, I think ultimately it's all about making decisions. At some point, you just have to stick a flag in the ground and say, those are the notes I'm going to war with, right? For better or worse, that's what I'm doing today. And then you get to the end and, okay. And hopefully the piece worked out the way you hoped it would. But sometimes you got to write 5 pieces before you get to the piece you were trying to write the first time around. But you got to finish it. It's the only way it works.
And is there ever a temptation after it premieres to kind of go, well, I think the second movement, we could change that around?
Yeah, this I do endlessly. I can't think of a single piece I've written that I think, yep, that all works flawlessly. There's always things. Early on, I decided that each of the pieces for me was a little, almost like a diary entry of who I was at that time. So if it's flawed, well, okay, that's who I was. And I'm not going to try to fix it. I'll just keep moving on and trying to improve my game. But that's a record of who I was at the time, warts and all.
When do you close that diary? So is it when it's premiered, is that it, set in stone?
No, God, no. So now, unfortunately, now it's when it's published. What I've discovered is now the premieres, I used to treat them in the concert world, a premiere is, this is the big unveiling of the piece, you know, and it's finished and now you present it to the world. That's this mountaintop experience that premieres used to have. Now for me, it's a first reading. It's like, all right, let's put it up in front of a crowd and see what happens. Well, that didn't work at all, right? And take it off, tear it apart, change it, try it again. Well, that was better, but still, right until, and I'll change a piece. I'll have 4, 5, 6 performances of a piece before it's, in my mind, locked and ready for publication, or at least close enough that I don't want to jump off the house when I listen to it.
So in an ideal world, say for example with this piece, what kind of running time is it looking to be?
So I think this piece is going to be probably 70 minutes, 75 minutes, an evening length piece. And the reason I know that, with each piece that I write, the beginning of the piece, the opening, is what I call the primer. And within that opening of the piece has all of the rules that the audience is going to need to take the journey. So it'll say something harmonically, it'll say something about the style, about the dynamism of the thing, and that thing it sets up the whole rest of the piece. I didn't mean to do this, but the first thing that I wrote with this piece was the opening movement. It's the first poem that Charles Anthony Silvestri wrote, and it's about 8 minutes long. So I already know if the opening is 8 minutes long, then the rest of the piece is probably going to be 75 minutes long, because the DNA of the piece is already in the opening here. So now we have to take this journey in order for this to make sense. So, yeah, I'm in the middle of it.
How long is this entire process going to take for you?
So the premiere will be February 19th, 2019. So as we speak now, 6 months, a little less. It'll take me up until the moment I give the first downbeat. I will be changing notes until singers start yelling at me.
And how long have you been, so what's the length in total? How long have you been working up to?
So I wrote the first bit of it over a year ago. Yeah. And then I've written a couple little things in between. And so it's just a process. And it's interesting, writing those little pieces were by design also because I've never written something this long before. So I'm also just trying to discover what the thing is. So I wrote that first movement, then, okay, let's try this moment. Let's try this moment. I knew what they're supposed to be in terms of the grand architecture, but I didn't know really what they would sound like. So I wrote it and then rewrote it and then rewrote it at different performances. And then, okay, that works. So then now I've got this, that works, that works. Okay, I think I know what this piece is starting to become.
I think one of the advantages of getting a few kind of works under your belt is the ability to understand your own abilities, your own workflow, your own productivity. So you have 6 more months to do this. Will there be, you know, based on your experience, a point at which productivity will ramp up?
Yes. So I know from experience that the way this will work is that it'll be kind of slow and lovely and a little bittersweet. And then as I get closer and closer to the deadline, I'll sleep less and I'll make more decisions. So with a piece this big, I realize that I can't leave it to the last minute, even if all the structure's in place. So there will be a point relatively soon in the process where I just wake up and say, it's the best idea I've got so far, that's it. That I hope it works, I don't know, but that's the right. And I'll just start just putting them in the sand this way. That being said, I know that I will become, as you say, more productive the closer the deadline approaches.
Something that's been fascinating about this Spitfire experience, other than the honor of meeting many heroes and fantastic talent and being able to collaborate, is to realize that we're all a bunch of procrastinators. What is the purpose of procrastination?
I'll tell you what it is, I believe. So I don't think it's that we're lazy. In fact, I think composers work obscenely, right? Especially as they approach the deadline. I think it's this idea at the core, which is that I'll have a better idea tomorrow than I do today. That can't really be the best thing I can come up with, so I'll wait till tomorrow. ultimately what I find happens is the pain of not finishing eventually becomes greater than the pain of starting, right? So as the deadline approaches, one kind of pain overwhelms the pain of fear and unknowing and like, oh, I've got to finish that. And then the problem with all of that is that we seem to be motivated only by pain and fear, right? It's the only thing driving us forward. That can't be healthy as a lifestyle. But yeah, I guess it beats working for a living.
So other than this piece, you've got lots of amazing stuff going on. This talk of spacey stuff, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a space nerd since I was 9 years old. I got my first telescope, and especially out in Nevada, at these wide open skies at night, perfectly clear. I was obsessed with it. I still am obsessed with space and NASA and all the NASA initiatives. And so a few years ago, I wrote a piece called Deep Field, and it's a big piece for orchestra and chorus at the end, and smartphones. The audience, at the end of the piece, I turned to the audience. This is after 20 minutes of this epic music. I turned to the audience and give them a downbeat, and they've all downloaded apps to their phone. They all simply push play, and then from each phone emanates this little electronica sound. It's really nothing by itself. But when you have 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 phones suddenly making it, and then the choir is surrounding the audience and the orchestra's playing from the stage, you really do feel like you're in the middle of this deep field image, which is a deep space image that NASA took, really of the furthest imaging we'd ever taken of our known universe. So you feel like you're in the middle of all of this. Anyway, so it's this massive piece. And then I decided that what I'll do is I'll take that choral bit there at the end and the stuff coming out of the phones, and I'll make a virtual choir that will accompany this. So now when people push play on their phones, not only will they have this little electronica sound, but they'll be having a single voice from somewhere around the world. And every phone will have a different voice playing on it. So suddenly a virtual choir, you'll be holding a voice, a person in your hand. From 120 different countries now, we've collected voices. So this is, it's been one of the joys of my life. And in working in the process of building this, I've now had a chance to visit several of the NASA space centers and the Space Science Telescope Institute in Baltimore, and really nerd out with, it's an opportunity I would never have as a civilian, or frankly, even as a composer, but somehow they've been very gracious and let me hang out. And it's just a dream.
It's fascinating to hear that a seemingly unconnected passion that you've had since you were 9, you've managed to arrive back there by way of becoming a composer, largely of choral music, something that you didn't set out to do at all.
It's so interesting how that happens, isn't it? How these little things, you ultimately, not to get all spiritual about it, but I think it comes down to following your passion, your bliss. If you're just doing that thing you love, even against all odds, then somehow a pathway will open up for you. At least I'd like to think that's the way it works. I've been tremendously lucky that way, but my God, if I got to play with some things that I never thought I would get a chance to do.
So this virtual choir project sounds absolutely fascinating. What did you get out of it, the experience?
It changed my life. It began as just the tiniest little experiment. This young woman named Britlin Losi, she was 17 at the time, uploaded this fan video to me. She was singing the soprano line to a piece I'd written called Sleep. And she didn't even know me. She just uploaded to YouTube hoping it would find me, and it did. And I had this incredibly simple idea that if I could get 25 people to do what Britlin was doing, to sing their part, soprano, alto, tenor, or bass, and then they would sing it alone and then just upload it to YouTube. As long as we were in the same key and the same tempo, you start all the videos at the same time, and this little choir would unfold, this virtual choir. It's a super simple idea. So at first, I didn't even know would it work, right? So the first virtual choir had 185 singers from 12 countries. And not only did it work, but it was musical. It was the craziest thing. I made a conductor track that they all followed from their laptop. And they followed dynamics, they followed retard, accelerando. It was crazy. And so this thing just appeared like music. And the part that I was not prepared for was seeing all of these faces alone wherever they were, singing back and making something larger than themselves. The poetry of the video itself, I just wasn't expecting that. And to see the sheer humanity of this. And each virtual choir that we build afterwards has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, I think we've had 20,000 singers now. The last virtual choir that we just finished, there were singers from 120 different countries represented. And also as young as 2 years old and as old as 102. And crossing all religions, all races. It's been this phenomenon. And I really feel like I'm just a spokesperson for it in a way. Like if anything, I'm a surfer. There's this massive wave coming in. I'm just catching the wave and riding on top of it because there's something in there. Something in the beauty of people not only wanting to do this, but needing to do this. People needing to join a thing, to become part of something larger than themselves that I find endlessly inspiring, but also it seems to be a fundamental part of the human condition. And in a way, the best part of the human condition, I think.
It's an amazing story. And I guess it takes people back to the experience you had back in Nevada joining that choir. And do you believe that there are, emotional, physical benefits to being a part of something like that?
Yeah, no question. And the science is there. In fact, we were even part of a study with Dr. Daisy Fancourt. She hooked all of us up to took our EKG while we were rehearsing, while we were performing, while we were singing, and then took saliva samples from 800 of the audience members before and after to see what is happening physically. And of course, it tells you exactly what you'd think, that not only singing, but listening to that kind of music has extraordinarily positive health benefits. It reduces the stress hormones and releases the hormones like endorphins and oxytocin, which is responsible for feelings of bonding and community. It creates a kind of euphoria. Also, there's the communal aspect, which we now know from hard science. Just coming together, being part of something, has a genuine physical effect on the body. Also, I just think it makes people better citizens. Makes people more compassionate, more empathetic. It's a gift that we have this kind of thing. I think it's why I was reluctant at first, but why I'm becoming more of an evangelist for singing is because it's just good. Only good can come from getting together and singing. And I'll pursue this the rest of my life for sure.
I think along with what you're saying, I think there's something very important about music education with young people and the development of the brain. It engages many young people in education, can draw them in. But we're seeing music education being eroded globally, which I think is a serious kind of human error.
A tragedy, I agree. It's disheartening. The battle's not over, so I still think, we can turn the tide on it. What I think we're seeing is the effects of, it was insidious the way they did it, because they began, this seems to be a global phenomenon, they began by cutting music programs to the very, very young. So those kids who were 5, 6, 7, right? And then as they came up, then they cut it for 10, 11, 12, then they cut it for high school. And the problem is, it's like taking this beautiful flower and then just trimming the roots, right? So eventually, I think what we're finding now is the very first generation who grew up without any exposure. Some did, of course, but some have no exposure. And some of those people are administrators and politicians and policymakers, right? And so now they can't even comprehend the value of this thing. To them, it seems like an add-on. They think that science, technology, education, or engineering, mathematics, this is what we should be learning. And if you happen to get a little bit of this other stuff, okay, it's kind of icing on the cake. Those 4 disciplines are essential for humanity, absolutely. But the arts are an equally essential part. It's not a thing that you do as a hobby. it's essential to being a better human. To also, it has positive effects on all of those other disciplines, right? We know that people study better if they're involved in the arts, that people learn better, that they make cross connections between disparate ideas. It's only good. So the fact that policymakers are removing it from a typical education, it's also madness. You're just going to be stronger as a society, as an economic engine, as a country, if you educate people in culture and in arts.
Yes, I think it's one of the things that is reflected in the music industry. I think the wrong turn the music industry took is seeing music as a luxury item, as an add-on, as you put it, $50 man. And whereas actually it's part of the human condition. Getting together, banging drums and singing songs is part of what we are as humans.
Yes, absolutely. And even the Greeks knew this. The 7 major disciplines with music was one of them. They knew this is not an add-on. This is a core part of what a human being needs to learn to be a better human being.
So you're working on some initiatives with teachers, is that correct?
Yeah, I am. So this one is a new one, and the idea was just to honor teachers around the world. I know my life was changed several times by teachers, truly changed, put on a path that I never would have found had it not been for them. And I know most people have this experience, and so I wanted to honor these teachers. So across social media, we asked for nominations for Teacher of the Week, and then each week I'll highlight some teacher and talk about what they've done and maybe some testimonials from some of the students whose lives they've changed. What's interesting is we did what we thought was a soft rollout. So I picked a teacher and I put it up, and I didn't really say anything about there's going to be a nomination process. There's going to be just here's a teacher and Teacher of the Week. And we were inundated with thousands of people saying, here's the teacher that needs to be honored. Here's how they changed my life. It's amazing how much people want to lift these teachers up who've altered the course of their life. So yeah, I'm proud to be doing it, and hopefully it'll shine just the smallest spotlight on really one of the most noble professions, teaching.
Absolutely. If you're interested in anything that Eric's talking about, we'll put some useful links in the video description down below. And I think that the one very interesting thing that I'm observing is that a real seat of learning is becoming YouTube. And I don't know if that's something you're experiencing clearly with what you're doing with the virtual choirs and stuff, is embracing something that is so often in the press for being kind of a source of bad and evil and fake news and this, that, and the other. Probably won't use that. No, I think that in the day and age that we live in, we perceive the internet to be is given a bad press. And what I'm seeing evidence of is certainly YouTube becoming a seat of learning and a seat of people coming together to share experience and things that they know and to learn stuff. I think that you seem to be embracing that too.
Yeah, to me, speaking specifically about YouTube, for all of its, let's say, nutritionless content.
Guilty as charged.
No, I love your channel. No, but that it's become, in a way, it's the Great Library at Alexandria. It's this collection of all human knowledge and experience. You can anything. You need to change the carburetor in your car. And you go and somebody's showing you how to do it. You can really learn almost any skill on YouTube now. It's extraordinary. And I think the generations before us, they use it without even thinking about it. Like, I'll just look up on YouTube. How do you do this? Okay, watch it a little bit. I've recently started cooking for really the first time in my life. And if it weren't for YouTube, I wouldn't know what I was doing, And it's extraordinary. You can go learn the entire tradition of cooking, at least, at first blush on YouTube. So I asked Chris Anderson one time, the curator of TED, I asked him, do you think that the internet is a force of good or a force of evil? And he was very thoughtful and he said, I think the word is still out on it. Yeah. And I think that's probably true. I mean, God knows we're seeing these days, it can be used in all kinds of malicious ways, the internet. But at the same time, it can be used in the most astonishing ways. I have great hope and faith in the human race, I think ultimately the astonishing part will win out.
And I think going back to your original point about music education, music not being an add-on, it being part of the human condition, maybe people will just find their way to that education by their own means.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And I think what we'll probably see very soon, if we're not already in the middle of it, is a sea change in traditional education. I think we'll probably look back 50 years from now and say, really? People used to sit in a classroom from the time they were 5 to the time they were 25? And that's how a thing was, that you'll have people who were educated solely through YouTube and receive an extraordinary education and might be more independent creative thinkers because of it. Who knows what we'll see?
Well, it sounds to me, Eric, like you've got lots to be getting on with. So we should let you get on with it. But thanks ever so much for letting us come here to chat about all of this fascinating process and what an extraordinary journey you've been on and you're continuing on.
Thank you so much.
It's a great honour. Excellent.